Welcome back to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic. The Kitchen Table series returns with deck tech number 55, and in today's build, we are going to showcase a mono-white Avacyn burn deck. What's up, MTG BC? That is the MTG Burgeoning community. The Kitchen Table series returns, the longest running content series at MTG Burgeoning. Today it's deck tech number 55, and yes, you heard that correctly, mono white Avacyn burn. So let's get right to, as generally is customary during the MTG Burgeoning Kitchen Table series, let's talk about the mana base. This is mono white, so there's no thrills, no frills, just a stack of 22 basic planes. That's going to be all of the lands included in this deck. Like I said, it's a mono white build, so there's no need to include anything else except a Soul Ring, because we're at the kitchen table, and because we're playing mono white, we got some biggins that we want to get out onto the battlefield. We're going to throw in 3 copies of Thran Dynamo. If you're not familiar with one of the greatest unheralded artifacts that produce mana in the history of Magic, for an investment of 4 colorless mana, you can tap this for 3 colorless mana. You can find very few other artifacts that can match the investment to return of a Thran Dynamo. 3 copies to go with our Soul Ring, to go with our 22 lands. That gives us 26 pieces of mana-producing lands. I'm sorry, mana-producing cards. Yeah, can you imagine if we could include Thran Dynamo lands? Oh, forget about it. All right, so let's skip right ahead to the crown jewel of the deck. Now, we said this was mono white Avacyn burn. So how are we going to burn things down a la Seth Rollins if we do not have access to red? Oh, we have access to Archangel Avacyn. 3 and 2 white is a 4/4 flying vigilant angel with flash. When she ETBs, creatures we control gain indestructible until end of turn. Whenever a non-angel creature we control dies, we transform Archangel Avacyn at the beginning of the next upkeep. And when she transforms, she goes mad. She becomes a 6/5 flyer named Avacyn the Purifier, and when she transforms, she deals 3 damage to each other creature and each opponent. So all we have to do is trigger Avacyn by having a non-angel creature die. She transforms into the red Purifier and then deals 3 damage to every creature but herself and 3 damage to each opponent. 4 copies of Archangel Avacyn / Avacyn the Purifier to help, strengthen our idea, to strengthen our theme here of this Avacyn burn deck. We're going to include a few creatures that have protection from red, because when the red damage starts flying around, we don't want to lose our entire board just because Avacyn decided to go a little off kilter. Introducing Core Firewalker, 2 white, a 2/2 protection from red that reads whenever a player casts a red spell, we may gain 1 life. We won't be gaining any life from spells we cast, but that doesn't mean that red won't trigger for any of our opponents. 3 copies of Core Firewalker, with the understanding that the protection from red, based upon Avacyn's lightning bolt ability to everything that isn't her or us, the Core Firewalker will survive. 3 copies of Core Firewalker. Next up, we're going to include Thermal Glider, a 2/1 flyer from Mercadian Masks for a mana value of 2 and a white that also has protection from red. So when Avacyn starts flinging around the bolts, Thermal Glider says, no thank you, I'm good. Protection from red, 3 copies of Thermal Glider. a little higher up the food chain, as it were, for the overall mana value of spells, and one of the reasons why we included 3 Thran Dynamos in the deck, is another white creature with protection from red, but this converted mana cost is much higher than Core Firewalker and Thermal Glider. It's going to be a full play set of Acroma, Angel of Wrath. 5 and triple white for a 6/6 legendary angel with flying, first strike, vigilance, trample, haste, protection from black, and, for the purposes of this deck, most importantly, protection from red. Now, it would take 2 potential Avacyn the Purifier triggers in order to finish off an Acroma Angel of Wrath if it didn't have protection from red. However, with the metagame and your particular playgroup, with their abilities to throw in additional damage from red, red is extremely popular in my metagame. It is the most popular color for with the players I play with. So including a copy of Acroma or an entire, blah, 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 blah. Let's try that again. Including an entire playset of Acroma is almost unfair to them because with red, they have just no interaction. 4 copies of Acroma Angel of Wrath to go with our 4 copies of Archangel Avacyn. All right, a few other creatures that we're going to add to this deck to help strengthen it a little bit outside of our protection from red. We're going to have a few creatures that are going to assist with that, but a few that are also going to do a couple of other things. So let's stick with the protection and go with a copy of Mother of Runes. It's 1 white for a 1/1, tap target creature we control gains protection from the color or colors of our choice. Now, it's not a definite thing that we're always going to use Mother of Runes for protection from red, but for the purposes of deck building, she's included as a way in which to keep something alive that maybe is a little more valuable when Avacyn becomes the Purifier. Next up, we're going to have a copy of Selfless Squire in play, 3 and 1 white as a 1/1 flash. When it ETBs, prevent all damage that would be dealt to us this turn. Whenever damage that would be dealt to us is prevented this way, we put that many +1/+1 counters on Selfless Squire. This creature's addition steps firmly away from our protection from red theme, and is just being included for the purposes of if we run into some troubles at the kitchen table. This doesn't really have much synergy with anything that we're doing previously shown in the deck. It's just one of those auxiliary cards that's going to help us with an alternate way in which to protect ourselves as we try to set up an Archangel Avacyn transformation into the Purifier. All right, next creature and another version of Avacyn. This is Guardian Angel, 2 and triple whites for a 5/4 flying vigilant legendary angel. We can tap 1 and a white to prevent all damage that would be dealt to another creature this turn by sources of the color of your choice. Again, the potential to step outside the realm of protection from red exists, which is dependent, of course, on who you're sitting down and playing with at the kitchen table. Tap 5 and 2 white, and we prevent all damage that will be dealt to target player this turn by sources of the color of our choice. So with an Avacyn out in play, and a lot of our opponents playing mono colors, with the amount of mana that we've included with our Thran Dynamos and our Soul Ring, we could have the ability to really hunker down and take control of the board. 1 copy of Avacyn, Guardian Angel. Now, just in case anyone decides to off one of our Archangel Avacyns before we can get it to trigger fully, we'll include a copy of Karmic Guide so that we can get Avacyn back into play if needed. 3 and 2 white, when she ETBs, return target creature from our graveyard to the battlefield. It has the Echo mechanic, which means that during our upkeep we have to pay its mana cost again, or we have to sacrifice it. For the purposes of this deck, most likely we'll just be paying the 3 and 2 white 1 time. It also has protection from black. Karmic Guide, 1 copy for the purposes of getting back most likely our Archangel Avacyn. And our last angel for the deck, I believe, nope, not our last angel, just one of our last big uns. We're going to include a copy of Emiria Shepherd. Again, this is another extension of what Karmic Guide can do, so that we can keep pulling Avacyn from our graveyard if necessary. This is a 5 and 2 white 4/4 angel, but it has the landfall mechanic. And whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we return target non-land permanent from our graveyard to our hand. That's okay. However, if we keep reading, if that land that comes into play is a plains, which I shift my card away to show that we already showed 22 of those. If it's a plains, we may return that permanent card to the battlefield instead. So with Emeria Shepherd in play, as long as we're playing lands, we're returning any non-land permanent from our graveyard right to the battlefield. Very, very powerful the Emeria Shepherd is. 1 copy. All right, so those are a lot of the creatures that are going to help us out. Now let's turn to some creatures that are not so helpful to our opponents. We're going to consider this our hate part of the deck. Aven Mind Sensor, 2 and a white, Bird Wizard, Flying Flash. If an opponent would search their library, they search the top 4 cards of that library instead. And it's important to note this is a non-angel card, so this would be a great card to trigger an Avacyn transformation, similar to the Selfless Squire and the Core Firewalker if necessary. Another angel, this is the Angel of Finality. We got 3 and a white, and when she ETBs, we exile an opponent's graveyard. She also flies and is a 3/4. That graveyard synergy is important because, again, meta game specific. Outside of red, a lot of graveyard shenanigans here at Burgeoning's metagame. All right, sticking with the hates, we go to World Queller, 3 and 2 white. At the beginning of our upkeep, we choose a card type. If we do, each player sacrifices a permanent of that type. This is a great way to trigger our own creature to die in order to transform Avacyn. We can pick creature, we can sacrifice one of our non-angels, or if we're really in a spot, we can just sacrifice the World Queller, and then we can trigger Avacyn, and we are able to clean the board with her lightning bolts all over the place. Next up, we have a Cataclysmic Gearhulk, 3 and 2 white. It's an artifact creature with vigilance 4/5, and when it ETBs, each player chooses an artifact, a creature, an enchantment, and a planeswalker from among the non-land permanents they control, and then sacrifices the rest. So this can come into play. We can choose this to go, keeping Avacyn in play, triggering Avacyn, and putting the Purifier at work. And lastly, we have Gideon Jura, the only planeswalker included in this deck. We all know what original Gideon can do, and he is a great fit in this deck just because we can take some attention away from our life total by having all creatures that an opponent controls attack Gideon, or we can just come down and destroy target tapped creature. If needed, if Avacyn has cleared the board, we can have Gideon turn into a soldier and lead the charge in combat and win via that way. That's 1 copy of Gideon Jura. All right, now let's talk about some removal and disruption to go with so much of the hate cards we've already talked about, and then we can bring this deck tech to a close. All right, some instant speed removal. We got 2 copies of Swords to Plowshares. One of the best removal cards ever printed. 1 white, exile target creature. Its controller gains life equal to its power. 2 copies of Swords to Plowshares. 1 copy of Declaration in Stone from Shadows over Innistrad. It's a sorcery speed. Exile target creature and all other creatures that its controller controls with the same name as that creature. They can investigate for each non-token creature exiled this way, and trust me, this helps to remove token armies like goblins. Trust me, goblins are huge in my metagame. Declaration in Stone helps to make sure that they're no longer a problem. And it will include a copy of Disenchant for any pesky artifacts or enchantments we may come across during the game. Still with the idea of disruption and hates, we're going to include Dawn Charm. How is this card not more popular? For 1 and a white, pick any one of the following 3 modes, all of which are extremely relevant in nearly every game of Magic ever played. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn, regenerate a creature, or counter target spell that targets you. Dawn Charm is an awesome card to include and very sneaky in a mono-white deck. Let's slow down those creatures that our opponents control. Let's slow down their mana rocks by including a copy of Blind Obedience. 1 and a white with the Extort mechanic. Artifacts and creatures our opponents control ETB tapped. And plus with that little Extort mechanic there, we can tap a white every time we cast a spell, and if we do, we drain our opponents for 1 life, and we gain 1 life. Blind Obedience will help slow our opponents down so that we can set up our Avacyn transformation. Nevermore, all the way back from original Innistrad. 1 and 2 white as an ETB's name a non-land card. The named card can't be cast. Again, this card is a lot more meta-specific. If you know of some decks that your opponents play with pretty regularly, it's a lot easier to include a card like Nevermore because that way you can hose what they're trying to do. And it being an enchantment form, and if red is one of the most popular colors of your metagame, that's going to be even easier to play with. Next up, we have a copy of Crackdown. 2 and a white, non-white creatures with power 3 or greater don't untap during their controller's untap steps. Now, this does have the propensity to come back and bite us a little bit because Avacyn the Purifier is red, and if she's in combat and we have Crackdown down, we're not going to be able to untap her. However, that's going to be one of those game state battlefield decisions. You cast a Crackdown if you need to. If not, then you leave it in hand and you let Avacyn the Purifier do her thing. All right, and we're down to 2 more spells. These last 2 spells are included to help us close out the game or to make sure that our game plan continues unimpeded. 1 copy of Gift of Immortality, 2 and a white. It's an aura that reads, when an enchanted creature dies, we return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. And then we return Gift of Immortality to the battlefield attached to that creature at the beginning of the next end step. So for the purposes of this card, that creature has to be killed twice within the same turn in order for Gift of Immortality to fizzle. If not, then that cycle just continues to repeat until either Gift of Immortality is interacted with or somebody exiles the creature. 1 copy of Gift of Immortality. And the last card completing this deck list, and it's a perfect card to close out the game, Stratascythe. It's an equipment for 3 with the imprint mechanic. When this equipment ETBs, we search our library for a land card, which will be a Plains, and then we exile it. And then equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each land on the battlefield with the same name of the exiled card. Easily getting 5, 6, 7 Plains into play and then slapping on Stratascythe to one of our Angels. That closes out the game very, very quickly, particularly because of the evasion of our Angels. And that's it, folks. That is Kitchen Table Series Deck Tech number 55, Mono White Avacyn Burn. Tell me what you think about this deck in the comments section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic.